The thing is, as long as there's some sort of a way that you have for yourself to get back into the swing of things. So for me, it's weekly.
Yeah.
For me, it's every single week I take about 60 minutes and I take a look at what the hell did I do last week? What did I do this week? Am I moving the needle forward? And if I acknowledge and I notice the fact that I'm not moving whatever needle I want to move forward, that's my sense of checks and balances, sort of to say, okay, I need to get my butt back on track.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of The Empire Show. I'm Bedros Keuilian, and this is an inside look. And today we are looking inside of the life of an entrepreneur who I've known since 2007. That's, golly, over 12 years. And I know he's amazing at sales. He's amazing at human performance. Where the mind is concerned, he is one of the most optimistic dudes I've ever met. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Gelfgot. Wait, tell me your last.
It's all right. It's Gelfgot. That's
Gelfgot.
Correct. That's right.
Because for years I've been pronouncing it incorrectly and I was never corrected. Gelfgot. Mike, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
And this is the Empire Show, and on the show we really do a deep dive into someone who has been successful. And guys and gals, if you're watching and listening to this, just know that literally every week, in fact, just 4 days ago, I got another DM from someone asking me, hey man, how much would it cost for me to get on your show? Because there are some big shows out there who will charge someone to get on the show, to give them some airtime and give them some exposure, and we never do that. So most of the time, the Empire Show is either just me or just me and Craig. Rarely we'll have a guest like you on board because you actually have value to add, and not because you paid us and gave us money. We never take money. However, if you want to give me money after this, I will gladly take it.
I'll take it at dinner instead.
Perfect, I'll take it. So, Mike, you and I met at Fitness Business Summit 2007.
Correct, the very first one. You got it.
The very first one in 2007. And I think that night of the first or second night, we sat in a conference room, you, me, and about 5 other people, and we ended up filming what ended up being my first information product, Close Clients.
How to close 9 out of 10 clients. That's right. Yep.
And we filmed that thing till about 11 o'clock at night. And you had so much value to add. So why don't you kind of tell me how you got in not only in the fitness world, but into the world of selling and influence?
Sure. So I guess to connect the dots to the story, right? So you and I had a mutual connection for a guy that, or with a guy that hired me and taught me how to sell personal training. And I think you guys did some work.
Was that Steve Dow?
No, it wasn't Steve Dow. Dan Fahey. That's exactly who it was.
Yep.
That's right. And so I knew there was that connection. And so in 2007, when I got to the Fitness Business Summit, I wanted to introduce myself. Hey, we know this guy. Sure. And then you and I started talking. Hey, by the way, we're doing this video thing tonight, and if you come, I will help you with your sales presentation. I said, really? Free coaching? Fair enough, I'm in. I mean, what else is there to do on a Friday night in Orange, County, California, right? Yeah. Anyways, I'm glad I went, and of course the tricks were invaluable, and I wrote you a very nice note after that. I started selling fitness when I actually worked for Bally Total Fitness. This was 2002, I believe. Yeah. And what's interesting about Bally Total Fitness is you learn what not to do.
Sure.
You learn how.
Give our audience an example.
Not to sell. Well, I mean, listen. So I think anyone that's made it anywhere, it feels like in the fitness business, somehow has ties to either Bally Total Fitness or 24-Hour Fitness, right? So the point is, when you walk into my club, you're buying a membership. If I had to make you someone's cousin or not boyfriend, you'd have to, in order to get discounts, you either need to be a spouse of some sort, right, or a family member.
A family member.
The point is, it was one of those deals where you walk into the club, I closed the door to the office. It was a glass office, and you go after it. I mean, that's not proper. That's not humane. But boy, you get good real quickly. When I got really frustrated, and when I really started learning, is when I would sit down with someone and they didn't buy from me, and then my general manager, his name is Eddie. He's this 5'2" meatball, right? Walks in, and in 5 minutes, he comes out with a membership agreement. I'm like, how is this possible, right? That he's able to make an impact in time that I'm not. Like, what is happening? And that's when I started really listening to a lot of books, and because I was sick and tired of missing people. But my fitness career, or sales career, if you will, started with Bally Total Fitness. I stopped working at Bally Total Fitness because I wasn't. I didn't feel like I was making a difference. In fact, I felt like I was taking advantage of people.
Sure. Well, which is why Bally's Total Fitness is no longer around.
They're not doing well. Yeah, they're not. Well, and I think there's some franchise stores, but the actual corporate office, I mean, there's ties to the mafia. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. But I learned what not to do. In fact, full disclosure, I got fired from Bally Total Fitness doing things I shouldn't have never been doing, which is interesting. Now, speed up a little bit when we had our clubs and our staff try to pull a fast one on me, and I'm thinking, gosh, if you really knew what you were doing, you should have done this, this, and this. It's not something to be proud of. But you could figure out real quickly how to make paperwork do whatever you needed to do.
Sure.
Right? Anyway, so I got burned out. I hated the fitness business, and then a buddy of mine gives me a call and he says, "Hey, man, you should come and interview for this PT manager position at this chain of clubs called Fitworks." This is in the Cincinnati market. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "No, man, I'm done. I want nothing to do with it. Start go back to school." Well, he was very persistent. And I didn't want to get hired. I came in after my workout, smelled, and anyways, they hired me anyway because I could sell fitness. But long story short, that's how I met my business partner, and that's how I met Dan Fahey, which speeds me up to 2007. That's when you and I met and filmed the How to Close 9 out of 10 clients.
My first info product, Closed Clients, which still now we're in the third version of that, and it's just crushing it for the personal training industry.
And it did well, right?
Yeah. That product alone has made several $1 million just by itself.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to my check sometime.
Right. It's in the mail. You didn't get it yet?
Maybe I need to update my address.
So, Mike, you and I have one other thing in common in addition to the fitness world and Dan Fahey, where we both kind of cut our teeth on selling. We're both immigrants to this country.
Correct.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me, like everyone knows who watches and listens to the Empire Show, what my immigrant story is.
Yeah.
There is something to be gained from this immigrant edge, and I'd love to hear your story if you could share it with our audience.
Yeah, it's a great story. In many ways, I was ashamed of being an immigrant when I came to the States.
I was too.
Because I was different. I mean, I wore Ninja Turtle shoes because that's all my parents could afford. Mm-hmm. I bought them. My grandparents actually got them for me at Walgreens for $4.99, right? And the sole in the shoe is, I still remember this like it was yesterday. It hurt to wear because it was rubber. There was nothing that was preventing your foot to hit the rubber, right? And they hurt. Anyways.
How old were you when you came to the United States?
I was 11.
11.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting. So I was born in Uzbekistan. The capital of Uzbekistan is called Tashkent, which is where I'm from. It's a dark place, very, very dark place. Very dark place. I remember when I was 7, 8 years old, I would walk into my grade school and there was a life-size, larger-than-life poster of Lenin and Stalin from ceiling to floor. And the doors were just these old, massive doors where you open up and literally it's right in front of you, right?
Yeah, and Uzbekistan, just like Armenia at the time, was occupied by the Soviet Union.
Correct. Until
hence Lenin and Stalin.
That's right. Until '91, until the rebuilding, the perestroika, until that whole, which, who we know that it takes years and years and years to actually fully reconstruct the socioeconomics of a country and the whole politics of the country. Just because you go from once the rebuilding happened, that doesn't mean overnight all of a sudden it's a democratic. No, in fact, nothing for us changed at all.
Right.
The mob still controlled everything. Right. But I remember this is an interesting story. I remember when I was 6 years old. So we lived in a small communist town. And the way that it worked is your food was rationed, right? They knew there was a certain amount of people that lived in that town, and your sugar and your flour and your rice, just your basic, it was rationed to you as a family based on how many people live in your family. So I remember standing, and then every month you would get a certain amount, or the local store, the government-ran store, would get a certain amount of food, and then you would stand in line to get the food. So I'm standing in line, I'm 6 years old, it is hot as hot could be. So we should really say Russia light. Right, because it's not like when people think of Russia, they think of maybe like Moscow. It was really southwest. It was actually the environment was quite warm. We would have maybe 1 or 2 snow days. That's it, but it wasn't It wasn't really all that cold. So I'm standing in line for sugar, and it is hot. For 2.5 hours, a 6-year-old stands in line for sugar. Never got it. I was bawling. There's no sugar. Now you go without sugar for a whole month, right? And then, as I got older, I'm thinking, how's that possible? Like, how do you run out of it? Like, the government gives you a certain amount. Well, what happens is this. The guy that manages the store, he'll tell you that he ran out of it. When in reality, what he's doing, he's taking that food and he's taking it to the black market so he can sell it so he can feed his own family, right?
Which is exactly how my father took enough material from the tailoring shop that he worked at, or the men's suit fabrication.
Sure.
Made enough suits to sell on the black market, raised enough rubles to then bribe an official in the Soviet party to allow us to escape. So that sugar that you never got, somebody sold in the black market to either feed their family better or to escape that environment.
Sure.
And that happened regularly.
And I mean, and that's common. Nobody really.
Yeah, it was a known thing, but you're not going to do anything about it because that's how it is.
Yeah, I mean, so we grew up like, think of poor, but like less than poor.
Yeah.
Like if there was such a thing, right? I mean, we would have, sugar here and there if I actually got it. My mom had 3 jobs. I hardly ever saw her. She was a conductor throughout the day. She would do nails and hair after she got off work from there, and overnight she would bake cookies and pastries for a local restaurant. She would sleep in the kitchen. She would close the door to the kitchen, because if she didn't close the door, my brother and I, because we were hungry, would steal the cookies, and it was worth taking. Yeah, that's right. Because the worst thing that could happen is I would get hurt, and my mom would be the one that would, beat me silly.
Yeah, so you got a beating from your mom, but at least you have a full stomach for once.
Full belly. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's
It's probably hard for people watching and listening to this to understand this. And I'll give another example of this where, and again, we talk about it so fondly now because we live in this amazing country in the United States, and we serve the people. And of course, by way of serving others, you create wealth for yourself.
Right.
But so I was 6 years old when we escaped. When I was 5, it was wintertime. I went and got in line for bread and butter with my mom.
Yep.
Very similar situation. And of course, in Armenia, very cold in the wintertime. And so everyone, you remember the big giant fur coats that men and women would wear all the way to the, so imagine these big buxom women wearing fur coats, and you're in line and you're smashed between your mom, who's got a fur coat, and then the person behind you who's got a fur coat. And the lines, as you remember, were really tight. You don't want anyone to squeeze in.
Oh, that's right.
And so you get just squished by fur for hours at a time, only to get to the end of the line and to be told, sorry, we're all out. Your ration's not there. And so you do have to buy things on the black market, which means that you have to steal something from somewhere to be able to generate that money.
Correct. That's exactly
Can you imagine if that's how life was here?
Oh man, I mean, I think,
the
and
cops
it's like when we would run and manage our business, right? There's a few things that I had a hard time, and it's not the right way to deal with it. And whatever way we'll have our shortcomings. Mine was dealing with entitlement. So my business partner would frequently, I got this because I would sometimes fly off the handle, because you don't come up to me and you say, hey, Bedros, I think I'd like to have a raise. It's like you earn it. Nobody's just going to give it to you, right? And it's and I think our a lot of people have a hard time understanding that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, your whole life you went earning things. There was no one for you to ask.
For sure.
And if you did ask, you'd either get backhanded or worse.
Right.
And so to think that someone would ask that of you, yeah, I could see. How
and your parents, right? They do the best with what they got. My mom divorced my father when I was 2.5. I haven't seen him, since. And so my mom did the best with what she had, raising my brother and I in a very turbulent times in Uzbekistan. Maybe we would steal food, and most of the time you don't even get away with it. Most of the time I would get my butt handed to me with people, your size, because and all I wanted to do was to eat food. There's a guy by the name of, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but his name is Norm Borlaug. So I don't know, I was reading something, and it was an article written that Bill Gates looks up to this guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, like Bill Gates is fond of someone. Who is this guy? Never heard of this guy before. So have you heard of him?
I have not.
No?
No.
So he's like one of those guys that won the Congressional Medal of Honor, right? He's the same caliber as Mother Teresa, right? And Mahatma Gandhi, right? And so, like, I never heard of this guy. Who's this guy? Right? So I started reading about him. And essentially, he is credited for crossbreeding crops to get rid of a bacteria called the rust, I believe, that was essentially killing crops in the 1930s, right? And so he went to school in Minnesota and he looked at all these hungry people. Says, someone's got to end this, right? And so anyway, so he set him on this journey. Long story short, he talks about something interesting in his book, and he says this. He says, if you don't know what hunger feels like, right? Then if you don't know what hunger feels like, then you have no idea what it's like to be hungry. If you don't know what hunger feels like, right? Then you don't know what hunger. When I read that, I had to put the book down. Like, man, ain't that spot on, right? Because he's talking about how in the 1960s, 1970s, he partnered up with Monsanto, right, to help them come up with these super crops. And not everyone's a big fan of Monsanto and what they've done. I get it, but he talks about these people would rather die on a full belly and maybe live a short life because there's something in the crop. But at least, right, they had a full belly. I'm like, man, I get it.
Yeah. It's easy for someone like you and I to understand.
I get it
because of where we come from.
Yeah.
So clearly, you've dealt with a lot of adversity in your time. Clearly, you've had to show a lot of resiliency and even resourcefulness to be able to steal food, know that you might get an ass whooping for that food you're about to steal. But to you and I, it was worth it because the alternative is to have hunger pain. And truly, folks, if you've never experienced hunger, now I'm not talking the kind of hunger where it's 12 o'clock is lunchtime, but it's like 1:30 and you're still working and you're just hungry and a little lightheaded, like, oh, my blood sugar's low. I'm talking about hungry where your stomach is eating your intestines.
Right.
And you are just angry. Like the word hangry came from the communist bloc countries, like where we came from. And I share that with you because perspective is everything. When you had, by the way, let me explain to you the kind of hunger where you can't just go to a restaurant, a drive-through, a Starbucks, order your fridge and find the solution. The kind of hunger where, fuck, I'm weak, I'm tired, it hurts.
Yep.
Now I got to go find or steal food.
And there's like Tony Robbins talks about this, the difference between being resourceful and having resources, right? And so, like, people have all the resources in the world for them to earn whatever the kind of dollars that they want to earn, right? Or lose weight or gain muscle, whatever you want to do, there are resources. The question is, will you be resourceful enough, right, to get it done? And I think you've talked about this quite a bit. So when you're truly physically hungry, boy, you get resourceful, right, real quick. John Berardi says something interesting about hunger. Hunger is not an emergency. I love that. It's not. Hunger is not an emergency until you get to a point where you get super resourceful. I know what it's like. You know what it's like. Yeah. So I think when you take that mentality in general, and the mentality is there's always a way. Like there's no such thing as something that you cannot do something. No, there's always a way. You will find a way simply because you were.
That lesson in adversity of hunger translates into every part of your life, including relationships, to not take advantage of your relationships, to not take them for granted, because you need to be fed through love and relationships, which obviously you're married, you have kids, right?
I have one, yep.
Yeah, and translates into business. And you and John started one hell of a business together. You guys, at one point, before you started to sell them off, had how many Anytime Fitness locations?
With 21 up until last year. We sold all 21 in one package to a guy, yeah.
Yeah, 21 until last year. So someone might ask, well, wait a minute, I can't, and this isn't about, obviously you guys know that I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, so why am I sitting here talking about Anytime Fitness? Because the bottom line is, no matter what the business model is, there's always a solution at the end of building, scaling, and selling.
Right.
And so that's what you did, and let's kind of dive into that just for a moment.
Sure.
So what made you decide when Anytime Fitness was really hot and on fire that, hey, this is the brand that I want to go with? What did you look for as indicators?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was 21.
Yeah.
I was looking for a job. Let's just start there.
Sure.
My business partner, whom I met working for a company back then called Body of Change, which was contracted by FitWorks to help them get their PT off the ground, essentially. John was their general manager. I was the PT guy. We met a year later. That's something that he wanted to do, and a year later we opened up our club. But, he came up to me and he said, hey, man, you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, that sounds really good, Bedros. Sure. So, I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I needed a job, and I liked my buddy, and it was always his dream. I'm like, sure, sounds good, let's do it.
Well, now let me stop you there, because John obviously had a lot of options of people he can go to.
Correct.
Why does he choose to go to you? Why don't you explain that? What
Yeah,
about
and
you?
well, he tells a really good stories actually, and he says, you know what, because he works a lot, right? He'll go get in at 8 o'clock in the morning. He'll stay till 8 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, right? And so, but every time he was there, I was already there. And I stayed after 8 o'clock, right? I would frequently get to the gym between 5 and 6, and I would stay until 8 or 9, sometimes 10 o'clock most days of the week, and I would work till about 6 on Saturdays and half a day Sunday.
So you're such a modest guy. And before you breeze over that, guys, let's stop again. All of you probably follow The Rock, and he always talks about being the hardest worker in the room. And here's a big reason why: because if you're the hardest worker in the room, you get recognized by someone who's willing to give an opportunity.
Correct.
And if you ever wonder why someone, coworker, a friend, someone else got the opportunity that belonged to you, know that they were probably the hardest worker in the room while you thought you were the hardest worker in the room. And so you showed up before John, you left after John, when John had an opportunity to give out, which was, hey man, do you want to partner up in this new brand that's emerging? He came to you because he saw a workhorse and someone that can help him move the needle just like he could.
That's right. And because he knew he had the membership part of it figured out, and he's done really well there, and he didn't really. He understood how the PT business is supposed to work. Well, let me take it back. He understood how the PT business is supposed to work, but he didn't know how to go about selling it, right?
Yeah.
And so, but for a year or so, that's all I've been doing. I've been selling PT, and plus, was working just as many hours, if not more, that he was doing. Hey, man, you want to do this thing together? He's such a kind guy. He says this, hey, Mike, so if we do this thing together, he says to me, I will give you 50% of a business that doesn't exist. What's 50% of zero, right? And he says, but if you stick with me for 12 months, right, I will give you 5% ownership of this Anytime Fitness, and you don't have to put any actual money, right? It's totally through pure sweat equity. Correct.
Yeah. Right? Sweat equity.
And if you speed it up, he's always owned more than I did, as he should, because he leveraged his whole life and his savings. But he gave me an opportunity.
Yet another lesson. How often do we see where two people partner up together and one person put in more risk, put in more money, and the other person's job was to put in effort and sweat.
Correct.
But at some point, we see the person who put in effort and sweat go, you know what, I think here we are 8 years in, I deserve more. It's like, let's not forget who put in the financial, who tapped out their 401k, sold their house, did whatever they had to do to buy into that. And look at the level of gratitude you show up with. You said, and understandably so, John owned more.
Correct, as he should, and
this is why you had a healthy and strong partnership till this day.
For sure, and I think that's actually critical. Like if you're gonna have a strong partnership, you have to know your role. Yeah. Right. There can't be two cocks, so to say. Right. There has to be a leader, and there has to be
I usually
both,
say
right?
chef, but cocks work.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I usually should say two chefs in the kitchen, but in Uzbekistan we say there can't be two cocks in the kitchen.
Goats, however you want to put it.
Goats. Yeah. No, I like two cocks in the kitchen. Yeah.
But that's critical, right? Although we have a lot of similarities, we have a lot of differences, and he plays a certain role, I play a certain role, and he can question me, I question him, but at the end of the day, we need to make a decision, and both my other business partner, we let John make the call, and I think that's critical. I was actually just told last month how grateful I was that he actually took an opportunity, right, to on me, right, and to total risk. Then none of this was gonna, pan out. And it was a good moment. Both got emotional.
That's awesome, man. That's great. So obviously there you guys built 21 Anytime Fitnesses, and just last year you guys packaged them up, put a nice bow on them, and sold them to someone else.
Yep.
And today you help people in a very different way. I'd be curious to know how you help them and what value you add to businesses today, because you guys probably got a nice chunk of change when you're selling 21 successful businesses at the same time. One might ask, well, listen, let me ask you this: why didn't you just consider retiring?
What does that even mean?
What does that mean?
What's funny is so when we did sell, So for 15 years, like I'm doing the same thing. It's a very rigid pattern. It's a very rigid routine. I get up a certain time. I go to bed at a certain time. There's things that I did.
15 years.
Right.
Man, I know people who won't do that for 15 minutes today. They go, for 15 minutes, I try to grow my Instagram account so I can get leads, and it didn't work. I quit.
That's
you did it for 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. I mean, you get it, right?
Yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying. And, but whoever says, it's kind of like being a routine to me is the same thing as working out. It's the same thing as time management. Like sometimes you're just better in time management than other times. Sometimes you're just better in sticking with it. Sometimes you're just better in staying disciplined. And sometimes you're not, and that's okay. The thing is, as long as there's some sort of way that you have for yourself to get back into the swing of things. So for me, it's weekly.
Yeah.
For me, it's every single week I take about 60 minutes and I take a look at what the hell did I do last week? What did I do this week? Am I moving the needle forward? And if I acknowledge and I notice the fact that I'm not moving whatever needle I want to move forward, that's my sense of checks and balances, sort of to say, okay, I need to get my butt back on track.
Sure.
Right?
When do you do that? On the weekend, or do you do the coming Monday?
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, yeah. Before, I get up pretty early, around 4:30 probably before anyone else
Do you
gets
believe
up.
successful people need to get up early?
I believe successful people need to have a set of disciplines, like a specific, methodical, and a consistent way of doing things. What time you do it, I don't necessarily think that matters. Like my business partner John, for example, he's not a morning guy, right? I am. I'd rather get to bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and be up at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I feel like I get more things done, but that's not him. Like
Sure.
But I think what's more important is to have a set of disciplines that you adhere to no matter what happens throughout the day. I think that's more important.
Non-negotiables.
Correct. Like there is no such thing as, well, I may or may not do this. No. There are certain, like Jim Collins talks about this in his book.
Great.
Great by choice.
Okay.
He talks about it, the SMAC recipe, specific, methodical, and a consistent recipe, or a set of disciplines that you adhere to. No matter, he applies it to all sorts of these different companies, like Progressive Insurance and Southwest Airlines. Like what makes those companies so successful, that no matter what happens throughout the day, they have these set of rules, set of disciplines that they adhere to no matter what. So we had a very specific SMAC recipe for our business. And then ever since I read that book, I'm like, man, I should really have and I didn't realize I already did, but the book really gave it more context, right?
Sure.
It gave it more teeth. Yeah.
Sure. So obviously you chose not to retire because you said, hey, well, what does retirement mean anyway? I'm guessing the reason you chose not to retire is what all successful people already know. It is the fastest way to die.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's exactly it, right? When there's no purpose per se, for sure, you die. What's his name? Viktor Frankl, right? Talks about it in Man's Search for Meaning. For 15 years I've been doing the same thing over and over again. And when we sold our business, I'm like, what do I do now? Well, so I found something to do.
What is it that you do now?
I didn't realize when we sold our clubs, I mean, we have a pretty decorated resume, at least within the Anytime world. So I didn't realize just the amount of calls that I would get, which very blessed, very grateful for that. So I'm doing quite a bit of helping local franchisees. So Anytime Fitness, right? They're transitioning their business from convenience to convenience plus coaching, and they're some are doing a really good job. Some franchisees are not doing such a good job. They just need some help, right?
Yeah.
And so.
You're the facilitator of that.
Correct. Yeah. So we help them transition essentially from convenience to convenience plus coaching, much like we did with our 21 clubs.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what is it about certain people? And it doesn't matter if they're a franchise or non-franchise. It could be that they ran business a certain way, then 2-3 airplanes hit the World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon, and all of a sudden the economy has changed, yet they refuse to pivot and change. So what have you noticed when you see these business owners? Some are willing to pivot and change to the new model, and some are resistant. And you said, you use some kind words, and some are having some resistance, and some they're having a hard time. What is it about the two sets of people?
Yeah, I would say probably.
Let's remove all filters and be.
Yeah, I would probably say two things. One, I think it's the natural human fear, which is fear of failure, right?
If I change, I might fail.
Correct. And I think the other part of it is that they're not leveraged enough, as sad as that may sound. So, we had 21 locations. My name was on 17 leases. Do that math, times 12 months, times 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like there is just no question on, is this or is this not? That's not even a thing. Like that, you don't, because if this wasn't going to work out, for example, I am effed for a long, long time, and I wasn't gonna put my family through something like that. And quite frankly, you know, John and I are in business together, and I told him I'll forever be in debt because he took me on as his partner, and like I wasn't going to allow that to happen. Are you kidding me? Like no flipping way. That is the ultimate leverage card for me, which is silly, even probably greater than my own family, knowing the fact that I have this guy that took a risk on me. There's no way in heck that his life is going to be messed up.
Right, that you're going to let him down and dig your heels in and say, we don't need to make this change.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of this change. What if it's the wrong change?
Yeah, and so to me, I guess those would be the two things. I guess the bigger one would be they may not be, which is crazy because when you think about when I say they may not be leveraged enough would be the biggest one. Like a lot of these people have leveraged their home, right? They're leveraged everything that they have, but that's not good enough because if it was, they would have done it, right? And Tony Robbins talks a lot about this, right? In his book, Creating Lasting Change, he walks you through how do you create a lasting change. Step one, get leverage. And so, gosh, if somebody isn't changing, they're not leveraged enough.
Yeah, when you have a lot to risk, you're willing to adapt to change faster.
It's like, what do you value more, right, than yourself to get through this change, whatever this change may be? And a lot of these club owners, I'm sure you see the same thing with Fat Body Boot Campers. It's a should. It's not a must. It's negotiating as opposed to like, no, this is the way forward and this is the way it is.
Yeah. Well.
So I think one, because they're not leveraged enough, right? And I think two, they fear failure. Right, and I guess the third one would be, man, they don't grow, man. They don't, like, it's just stale up here. Like it's a.
They're not growth minded.
They're fixed mindset. That's exactly a total fixed mindset, right?
Ironic how we haven't seen each other for years, yet we keep spitting out the same words and the same phrases because success leaves clues, ladies and gentlemen. And you could see that we're breeding from the same books, from the same authors, from the same strategies, even though we haven't seen each other for years, right? And that's important for people to understand that when we bring guests onto the Empire Show and you hear the same thing over and over again, it's not that, you know, him and Tom Bilyeu and Ed Milet and all these people have colluded and said this is what we're going to talk about on the Empire Show. It's because there is a formula, a recipe to success, and that recipe includes being growth-minded and being open to change and pivoting quickly when you must. So that said, when you guys left Uzbekistan with a lot of money and came to the United States with a ton of money.
Correct. Yeah, it was, in fact, the whole street was plated in gold.
Right. So it obviously wasn't because anytime you're leaving a communist country or country that, well, you left when it was still
93 is when we left. So 91
so
was.
communism had fallen.
Correct. Supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly. Yeah. And again, guys, with Armenia, it took well over a decade for the corruption to go away after communism fell. So I imagine it's the same there. You weren't allowed to leave with much, and it's not like you guys had much anyway. So I'm curious. Let's go full circle and talk about what was your escape into the United States? Like ours was, you know, telling the Soviet government that we're just going to go visit my mom's sister in Italy because, you know, Italy was communist sympathizers. We left during the communist regime. Of course,
What year was that?
We left in 1980.
No kidding.
I was 6 years old, and so my mom didn't even have a sister in Italy. Like. My dad just.
But that's what you said.
That's what we said, and of course we go to the American consulate. We say that we're political refugees. My dad is part of the Communist Party, and he doesn't want to be, and that we want to go to the United States and become citizens of the country and serve this country, which we do. And that's how we got here. So, what was your avenue? Because people need to hear a story of like how well you have it if you're born here.
Right, and it's an interesting story because you can't just say I want to come to the United States, right? And so at least. In 1988 is when we filed the paperwork. So my grandfather, my mom's father, had he divorced a lady and then he married a different lady, right? And this different lady,
much younger, hotter.
Correct, always, right? And then this different lady had a daughter that lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. So now that my grandfather was married to this lady who had a daughter in Cincinnati, Ohio. So this daughter called on her mom, who was married to my grandfather, right, to come to U.S.
Yeah, because they can sponsor you.
Correct. Yeah. You can't, like, you have to have immediate blood family. You can't just say, I'd like to go to U.S., right? And then once my grandfather got to Cincinnati, Ohio, and he got situated, then he called on my mother.
Yeah.
That whole process took 5 years, right? There was all sorts of paperwork back and forth, that had to happen. But before we could even leave, my mom divorced my father when I was 2.5. So we left when I was 11. So no communication with the guy for 8.5 years. Can't leave the country without his approval.
Oh,
interesting, right? So we had to meet him, and he had to sign off for us to leave. What's interesting story? So we are on our way from Uzbekistan to Moscow, and then from Moscow you go to Cincinnati, Ohio, right? Because you don't have a car, like there's no airplane.
Right.
You take a train.
Train.
That's it. That's the only way to get there, right?
Yeah. Suitcases, and by the way, the suitcases have no wheels.
No,
they're not functional. You just
carry it. And the
farm or
train
walk.
smells, right?
Yeah.
Because there's animals there, and there's just people, a lot of people. And so we got on the train, and there was a 3-day train ride from Uzbekistan through some of the other stands. One of the stands happened to be Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Into Moscow. So as we were taking this train through Afghanistan, the train was shot at multiple times. Thankfully, the train didn't stop.
Sure.
But that was interesting, right? You're on the floor, covering yourself while the train is being shot at. And then when we came to the States, when we came to Moscow, it's the first time I had a banana. I was 10 years old.
You and I have so much in common. Do you know that? So you had yours here in the States. I had my first banana.
Well, in Moscow. So
I'm sorry, you had yours in Moscow?
Yes.
Okay, I had my first banana in Italy. So it's funny, we both remember our first banana.
Yeah, I love it. I love bananas.
They're
amazing.
What about peanut butter? Do you feel the same way about peanut butter?
Yes, I like crunchy peanut butter. Yes, it's very, very good. Yeah, I love it.
I had the first peanut. So I had my first banana in Italy, and I had my first taste of peanut butter in the United States. And I got to tell you, it was like, oh, there's my other half. Like now I understand what they say about kindred spirits. My kindred spirit comes in a jar of creamy peanut.
What's interesting? So when I came to the States when I was 11, first I've never seen that amount of food before.
Yeah.
Right. And remember, I was always hungry. So my grandparents, where'd you get a load of this? Right. So we went to the grocery store. I mean, there's just aisles. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all this. Right. So. And I really think that my fitness journey personally started when I was 13 because I gained like 50 pounds. The first time I had McDonald's when I was 11, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
And I ate, and I think the last time I had McDonald's when I was 13. And I ate McDonald's like 2, 3, 4 days a week, as often as my grandparents could take me there, right? And I gained 50 flipping pounds. And so, then I became a teenager. I started liking girls. They didn't really like me for many different reasons. I thought it was because I couldn't keep up with them in gym class. It has nothing to do with that. But that's when I really started changing sort of, right? Yeah. And this doesn't cut it anymore. But we all know what we got to do. Like you take a person who's overweight and you take them grocery shopping and ask, hey, apple or apple pie, which one's better, right? Like grilled or fried. Like we all know inherently what we need to do, but apparently we have no idea. All of a sudden we get unresourceful. What you think? So at 13 years old, I had the basics of what to do. I always knew that home cooked meals are just better, right? I asked my mom, hey, can you not put as much oil in here? And I started, researching some things, started working out. And I really think my fitness journey per se started when I was 13 years old, right? Poor confidence, poor self-esteem. I like girls. They didn't like me. I'm like, well, something's got to change.
Right. Yeah, that is a great motivator. Again, leverage, right?
Right.
That's a lot of leverage. I don't want to not have sex the rest of my life because when you're a teenager, you go, I like girls. They don't like me. This may mean a lifelong term of not having sex. I better start doing something. To
Alone, right? I mean, I was just so different. I was wearing Ninja Turtle shoes, pink socks.
I would have found that attractive.
Right. That's right. We would have gotten along if that was the case. What's interesting? So I'm sure you remember this. So when I was growing up, you only wore white socks when it was some sort of a festivity, like a birthday of some sort, right? Or something special. The rest of the time, you just wore whatever kind of socks that you could, but you only wore white socks when it was a special occasion. Maybe it wasn't like that in Armenia, but that's the way it was like in Uzbekistan. So, that's right. So when I came to the U.S., everybody wears white socks all the time. Well, I never had any white socks, right? And so, anyway, so whatever. Walgreens provided us with some white socks. Yeah. It was interesting. Really, I can wear white socks. I would have loved wearing white socks.
Huh. It probably made you feel special, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Like every day, there's something special happening.
That's right.
White socks.
That's exactly it. And I was always conditioned that way.
Yeah, I'm curious. Are your socks white today?
They're gray. They're close. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a semi-party.
Yeah.
It's a semi-party. This is a business podcast after all. All right. So I'm curious. What does your morning routine look like? During the week, what does your morning routine look like?
I can tell you over last 12 months, my morning routine is a bit lax as I haven't had to stay. But I can tell you, the morning routine is still very disciplined. Not as disciplined as I would like for it to be, but it's still disciplined. I get up between 4 and 5 a.m. And it's typically, the first thing I do is I pray, right? And who's it that I'm grateful for, and what am I grateful for? It's very, very important. And the second thing I do, this is going to sound real silly, but the second thing I do is I read 6 pages every day.
Why 6? Why not 5?
It takes me 15 minutes.
Okay, so you have time to your reading speed, 6 pages. There you go.
Takes me 15 minutes.
Yeah.
With that pace, I can get through about 6 to 8 books, actual reading books. It was 4 pages. I bumped it up to 5, and this year I got real ballsy. I said, you know what, I'm going to bump it up to 6.
6.
The point is that if you have no time to read, it's such bullshit, is what I'm saying.
Right. What are you typically reading? Like, give us the example of the last 3 books you read.
Yeah, so the last 12 months, I didn't realize how much
Is it
time...
Harry Potter? It's not Harry Potter.
Not Harry Potter, no.
I didn't think
Actually, I never really got into Harry Potter.
Nor did I. You know why? Because I got into making money and helping people.
Yeah, you know what? I like making a difference, and in many ways, making money is one of those things, right? Because I'm able to give back, and that's actually one of the things that really motivates me. Whatever it is that we do next is to have the ability to give back significantly. But the last 12 months, I've changed what I'm reading. I didn't realize how much in the business I was actually thinking. I thought I was working on the business. I haven't had to think about operations in the last 12 months because I have one of our regional managers. He stayed with us, and so now he's our equal partner in the one club that we have left. So I don't talk to him about, hey, how many appointments did we set up today? We have higher quality conversations, right? Because he knows what he's got to do, and he's doing a really, really good job. So over the last 12 months, I've been doing a lot of reading on marketing. A lot of reading on lead generation, right? And so, when we had, knowing what I know now, I would have managed our whole marketing part of our 21 clubs completely differently, knowing what I know now. In many ways, we didn't do as good of a job as we should have. But I've read. Dan Kennedy is the guy that I've been reading when it comes to lead generation, No BS Guide to Social Media Marketing. Actually, right now I'm reading his book, The Magnetic Marketing.
Magnetic Marketing.
Yeah. Great stuff. I read 2 or 3 books, and it's like, hey, let's give it a whirl. And we generated about $180,000 in the last 12 months through some of the things that I've read about. I'm like, oh.
What do you know?
Yeah. How about
one of my favorite books of Dan Kennedy, and guys and gals listening and watching this, it is The Ruthless Management of People and Profits. I love how he speaks so openly and honestly. Ruthless Management of People and Profits by Dan Kennedy. Great book, and really awesome for anyone who's going into the entrepreneurial world, because when you go into the entrepreneurial world, you go with the aspirations that, well, everyone's going to work as hard as me, everyone's going to be as motivated and as driven and as passionate, and the reality is no one is.
Correct.
And you must learn how to ruthlessly manage your people and your profits. Yeah, so it's a great thing there.
You asked me an interesting question, like how many, up until up until last year. So I would get through 3 or 4 books a month on audio. On top of that, I would finish a book roughly every 6 to 8 weeks. It's a lot of content I would go through. Tremendous amount of content. It's ridiculous. For the last 12 months, I haven't necessarily read a whole lot of new books other than some Dan Kennedy. I've reread a few books that I found to be very impactful for me, especially now due to the nature of the work I'm doing with some of the franchisees. And one of those books is 4 Disciplines of Execution. Yeah. Love that book. I wish I would have read the book 5, 6, 7 years ago. The other book is Creating Lasting Change by Tony Robbins. Yeah. If there was a book on selling that gets me sharp, boy, the book has nothing to do with selling, by the way. Right? The book has everything to do with influencing people's behavior, which is really what you're doing at point of sale.
Which is what selling is.
That's right. And so he doesn't necessarily discuss, well, this is a great script or this is a smooth way to talk through objections. He doesn't talk about that. He just talks about here's what makes humans tick, and here are the steps on how to do it. Right? So those are the 2 books that I've reread over and over again. And then No BS Guide to Social Media Marketing. There's actually a book by Alex Hormozi. I'm sure you've heard of him, right? He got his book out, so he's got some interesting content in there. Took some of those nuggets of wisdom that he puts out and implement in our system, and it's magic.
So that said, where family is concerned, and we'll kind of end on this note, because I think it's important for people to understand that you can be successful in business and still be married and have a family. Is there balance in your life, or do you call it a work-life mix? Do you just ignore your family, and is everything just falling apart around you?
Whoever tells you that that work-life balance can exist, I think, in my opinion, has never worked a day in their life. Like, I think everything great always happens outside of balance.
Yeah, in chaos.
Always, right?
Yeah.
The problem is you can't live right in that state of being, and for 15 years we did, which is actually one of the main reasons why we decided to say, you know what, maybe it's time to, put ourselves and our families first and put everything else second.
Yeah.
Like we have, personally, I have 2 speeds, right? I go fast and I go faster, and it just doesn't always work when it comes to family. But now that we've sold our clubs, I still need to do a better job in spending more time with my family, right? So when you grew up in Uzbekistan, so my mother had a different effect. So my mother never had a darn thing in her whole life.
Sure.
She comes to US, I want everything. Right? Like, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, right? Me, on the other hand, because I never had anything in my life, I had the opposite effect. I'm going to save, and I'm going to be so smart, and smarter than my mom ever was about money. So I have the opposite effect. I want to save, and I want to preserve, and I don't want to spend money unless we absolutely have to. And did we think about this? Is this spontaneous or not? So as a result of that, my mindset needs to evolve. And it hasn't quite evolved yet. I recognize it, and I'm talking about it, which I think is a positive thing.
Yeah.
But to go back to your original question, am I spending more time with my family now? I absolutely 100%. We just got back from vacation. I need to do better, right? But I recognize that.
Dude, how cool that, you could have very easily just sold us some bullshit and said, hey, look, things are great, things are fantastic. My wife thinks that I'm the king of the house, and that's that. But the reality is, you're like, look, there is no real work-life mix or work-life balance. It is some level of mix. You're either fast or faster, which is what you are. And most type A entrepreneurs are cut of that cloth. And every day we have to make an effort towards getting better with our families, because the reality is we are programmed, coded, hardwired to just go,
Right.
to produce, especially when you come from lack, like when you haven't had, and now you have the opportunity to have, and you see all that's available to
And it's that opportunity that gets me in trouble. Like, I just don't let it go away.
Yeah,
like,
you don't let it pass.
I just, like, if there is one, we gotta.
Yeah.
Why don't we? Why wouldn't we? Right? And over the last 12 months, like, that's the part where I've lost a little bit of an edge on.
Yeah.
Right? But I need.
Good. And part of that is I don't know, at least for me, I can't speak for you, but it's for me, as I gain some wisdom by way of age, I began, the rough edges begin to smoothen out, and I become I think a better father, a better husband, a better leader, just through wisdom and realizing that, hey, it's okay to let some opportunities pass in exchange for experiences that will live a lifetime.
And that's where personally, mentally wise, I need to continue to work towards it. My wife and my business partner, John, I mean, they do a really good job with that, to remind me to have fun.
Sure.
Right. And then once I am reminded to have fun, boy, I'm a great time. But
Mike Gelfgot, man, listen, you have provided so much information, Mike, and you have provided so much value. I'm curious, if anyone wants to connect with you, learn from you, catch up with you, where do they go?
Yeah, listen, shoot me an email. Would be I don't have a brand much like Bedros does, but I do. Shoot me an email. It's a mike.gelfgot@gmail.com, and Gelfgot is spelled Gelfgot.
There it is. Mike Gelfgot. Thank you so much for spending time on The Empire Show. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching and listening to this episode of The Empire Show. If you got a lot of value from this, and I know you did, do me a favor, take a screenshot, share it on social media. Be sure to tag me, and if Mike has a social media account, be sure to tag him as well. And of course, leave us a 5-star review, leave us comments, and as always, don't forget to tell your mama. We'll see you later.